I didn't do my hair, though. Hey, everybody. Quarantine hair. Hashtag.
I also have quarantine hair.
Yeah, but yours always looks excellent, so.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I haven't gotten a divot cut in my thing yet, but that does not mean I cannot paint while you read. Do you need help finding the spot, or did you find it already?
Let me look. I haven't looked yet. Many meetings.
Why could we all see their horses is the last thing I remember.
Hang on. Let's see. Blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah.
Why could we all see their horses? And then it was because they are real horses, just as the black robes are real. We read that bit.
I don't remember reading about the geese screaming.
Indeed. I think I would have remembered that because I have a running joke going with a friend right now about the subtitles in the show Vikings. Because every time there's geese on screen, the subtitles say, like, geese honk anxiously. What do you guys do to the geese?
Right.
Why are they so anxious all the time?
I watched the first couple of episodes of Vikings and I didn't like it because it's very embarrassment humor. Like The Office and yeah, it's like a Office. Different Vikings?
Different Vikings. This one's not a sitcom.
It's more of the one I'm thinking of is the one on Netflix, and it's not a sitcom. But it's a mockumentary. Like people occasionally talk to the camera and stuff. Then I'm thinking of something different.
I don't think that's the same one. Does it have the guy with the braid down the middle of his hair and like shaved on the sides? Ragnar, I think his name is.
That's a different Vikings, maybe. Although that character could exist in everything having to do with Vikings, and I just haven't noticed. Shared universe. I'm
pretty sure because this one was like supposed to be like historical and serious.
Okay, it's not that then.
Yeah, no.
That's what people get for giving their shit really generic names. Vikings. Incidentally, Avi has decided to learn Irish with me. He downloaded Duolingo.
Cool.
And I was like, yeah. And then I downloaded Duolingo so I could play alongside him. Yeah.
That's lovely.
I prefer Rosetta Stone because of all the pictures.
Mm-hmm.
Translates to pictures instead of words. But there's no rule says you can't combine them. And it's the grammar is easier to absorb on Duolingo because it's really hard to draw pictures of correct grammar.
Indeed.
Anyway. Oh, let me mute so I can move the thing.
Just as the black robes are real robes that they the horses are real horses, just as the black robes are real robes that they wear to give shape to their nothingness when they have dealings with the living. Then why do these black horses endure such riders? All other animals are terrified when they draw near, even the elf horse of Glorfindel. The dogs howl and the geese scream at them. Because these horses are born and bred to the service of the Dark Lord in Mordor. Not all his servants and chattels are wraiths. There are orcs and trolls, there are wargs and werewolves. Never again mentioned, by the way. I know that comes up in the Silmarillion, but like...
They come up a lot in the Silmarillion, but yeah. And what is the difference between a warg and a werewolf? Never clear. And they're not real werewolves. They're not transforming werewolves. They're just really big fuck-off wolves.
Yeah, that's not what... Okay, Tolkien. I'm sure you had a reason.
But you know what's interesting? the wereworms probably don't transform either, and he probably knows the etymology better than we do and chose the word on purpose.
I'm sure he did.
But what's interesting is there is two transforming wolves in the Silmarillion, and they're both in the Beren and Luthien story. Sauron transforms into one, and Beren transforms into one. So those two are, by modern standards, werewolves. As far as I know, that's it, though. Leave a comment if you disagree. Okay, I'm off.
All right. Let's see. There are wargs and werewolves, and there have been, and still are, many men, warriors and kings, that walk alive under the sun and yet are under his sway, and their number is growing daily. What about Rivendell and the elves? Is Rivendell safe? Yes, at present, until all else is conquered. The elves may fear the Dark Lord, and they may fly before him, but never again will they listen to him or serve him. And here in Rivendell there live still some of his chief foes, the Elven-wise, lords of the Eldar from beyond the furthest seas. They do not fear the ring-wraiths, for those who have dwelt in the blessed realm live at once in both worlds, and against both the seen and the unseen they have great power. I thought that I saw a white figure that shone and did not grow dim like the others. Was that Glorfindel, then? Yes, you saw him for a moment as he is upon the other side, one of the mighty of the firstborn. He is an elf lord of a house of princes. Indeed, there is a power in Rivendell to withstand the might of Mordor for a while, and elsewhere other powers still dwell. There is power, too, of another kind in the Shire. But all such places will soon become islands under siege if things go on as they are going. The Dark Lord is putting forth all his strength. Still, he said, standing suddenly up and sticking out his chin, while his beard went stiff and straight like bristling wire, we must keep up our courage. You will soon be well if I do not talk you to death. Yeah, Gandalf. You are in Rivendell, and you need not worry about anything for the present. I haven't any courage to keep up, said Frodo, Frodo, stop nagging yourself. Don't let Gandalf get into your head like this.
Right? No.
But I am not worried at the moment. Just give me news of my friends and tell me the end of the affair at the ford, as I keep on asking.
At least he's not only nigging on himself.
And I shall be content for the present. After that I shall have another sleep, I think. But I shan't be able to close my eyes until you have finished the story for me. Gandalf moved his chair to the bedside and took a good look at Frodo. The color had come back to his face, and his eyes were clear and fully awake and aware. He was smiling, and there seemed to be little wrong with him. But to the wizard's eye there was a faint change, just a hint, as it were, of transparency about him, and especially about the left hand that lay outside upon the coverlet. And still, that must be expected, said Gandalf to himself. He's not half through yet, and to what he will come in the end, not even Elrond can foretell. Not too evil, I think. He may become like a glass filled with clear light, for eyes to see that can. You look splendid, he said aloud. I will risk a brief tale without consulting Elrond. Oh, just the one?
Right.
But quite brief, mind you.
Sure.
Yeah, right. But quite brief, mind you, and then you must sleep again. This is what happened, as far as I can gather. The riders made straight for you as soon as you fled. They did not need the guidance of their horses any longer. You had become visible to them, being already on the threshold of their world. And also the ring drew them. Your friends sprang aside off the road, or they would have been ridden down. They knew that nothing could save you if the white horse could not. The riders were too swift to overtake, and too many to oppose. On foot, even Glorfindel and Aragorn together could not withstand all the 9 at once, which suggests that on horseback they might be able to, which I find fascinating.
Right? That's an interesting scene to picture.
Right? When the ringwraith swept by, your friends ran up behind. Close to the ford there is a small hollow beside the road, masked by a few stunted trees. There they hastily kindled fire, for Glorfindel knew that a flood would come down if the riders tried to cross, and then he would have to deal with any that were left on his side of the river. The moment the flood appeared, he rushed out, followed by Aragorn and the others with flaming brands. Caught between fire and water, and seeing an elf lord revealed in his wrath, they were dismayed, and their horses were stricken with madness. 3 were carried away by the first assault of the flood. The others were now hurled into the water by their horses and overwhelmed. "And is that the end of the Black Riders?" asked Frodo. "No," said Gandalf. "Their horses must have perished, and without them they are crippled. But the ring-wraiths themselves cannot be so easily destroyed. However, there is nothing more to fear from them at present. Your friends crossed after the flood had passed, and they found you lying on your face at the top of the bank, with a broken sword under you. The horse was standing guard beside you. You were pale and cold, and they feared that you were dead, or worse. Elrond's folk met them, carrying you slowly towards Rivendell." "Who made the flood?" asked Frodo. "Elrond commanded it," answered Gandalf. "The river of this valley is under his power, and it will rise in anger when he has great need to bar the ford. As soon as the captain of the ring-wraiths rode into the water, the flood was released. If I may say so, I added a few touches of my own. You may not have noticed, but some of the waves took the form of great white horses with shining white riders, and there were many rolling and grinding boulders. For a moment I was afraid that we had let loose too fierce a wrath, and the flood would get out of hand and wash you all away. There is great vigor in the waters that come down from the snows of the Misty Mountains." "Yes, it all comes back to me now," said Frodo, "the tremendous roaring. I thought I was drowning, with my friends and enemies and all. But now we are safe." Gandalf looked quickly at Frodo, but he had shut his eyes. "Yes, you are all safe for the present. Soon there will be feasting and merrymaking to celebrate the victory at the ford of Bruinen, and you will all be there in places of honor." "Splendid," said Frodo. "It is wonderful that Elrond and Glorfindel and such great lords, not to mention Strider, should take so much trouble and show me so much kindness." "Well, there are many reasons why they should," said Gandalf, smiling.
You are not one of them.
I was going to say, I am one good reason. The ring is another. Hey,
Hey.
shut up, Gandalf.
You
You
are a
weren't-
friend of mine, so yeah.
I'm like, your ass wasn't even there this whole time. Give me a break.
Right?
And you are the heir of Bilbo, the ring finder. "Dear Bilbo," said Frodo sleepily. "I wonder where he is. I wish he was here and could hear all about it. It would have made him laugh. The cow jumped over the moon, and the poor old troll." With that, he fell fast asleep. Frodo was now safe in the last homely house east of the sea. That house was, as Bilbo had long ago reported, a perfect house, whether you like food or sleep or storytelling or singing, or just sitting and thinking best, or a pleasant mixture of them all. Merely to be there was a cure for weariness, fear, and sadness. As the evening drew on, Frodo woke up again, and he found that he no longer felt in need of rest or sleep, but had a mind for food and drink, and probably for singing and storytelling afterwards. He got out of bed and discovered that his arm was already nearly as useful again as it had ever been. He found laid ready clean garments of green cloth that fitted him excellently. Looking in a mirror, he was startled to see a much thinner reflection of himself than he remembered. It looked remarkably like the young nephew of Bilbo, who used to go tramping with his uncle in the Shire, but the eyes looked out at him thoughtfully.
You okay?
Choking.
Don't do that. I know, great idea, right?
So good. Thanks for telling me that.
It's not useful, but then nothing I could do would be useful, so.
I'm good. I just swallowed my tea the wrong way. Oof. Do. "Yes, you have seen a thing or two since you last peeped out of a looking-glass," he said to his reflection. "But now for a merry meeting." He stretched out his arms and whistled a tune. At that moment there was a knock on the door, and Sam came in. He ran to Frodo and took his left hand, awkwardly and shyly. He stroked it gently, and then he blushed and turned hastily away. Gay!
Yep.
Like that's like a fan fiction moment
It
right
totally.
there.
Yeah.
"Hello, Sam," said Frodo. What? Someone walks up to you, strokes your hand, and then blushes and turns away, and you go,
Hey,
"Hi."
yeah. How you doing?
"It's warm," said Sam, "meaning your hand, Mr. Frodo. It has felt so cold through the long nights. But glory and trumpets!" he cried, turning round again with shining eyes and dancing on the floor. "It's fine to see you up in yourself again, sir. Gandalf asked me to come and see if you were ready to come down, and I thought he was joking." "I am ready," said Frodo. "Let's go and look for the rest of the party." "Oh, I can take you to them, sir," said Sam. "It's a big house, this, and very peculiar. Always a bit more to discover, and no knowing what you'll find round a corner. And elves, sir! Elves here and elves there. Some like kings, terrible and splendid, and some as merry as children. And the music and the singing. Not that I have had the time or the heart for much listening since we got here, but I'm getting to know some of the ways of the place." "I know what you have been doing, Sam," said Frodo, taking his arm. "But you shall be merry tonight, and listen to your heart's content. Come on, guide me round the corners." Sam led him along several passages and down many steps and out into a high garden above the steep bank of the river. He found his friends sitting in a porch on the side of the house, looking east. Shadows had fallen in the valley below, but there was still a light on the faces of the mountains far above. The air was warm. The sound of running and falling water was loud, and the evening was filled with a faint scent of trees and flowers, as if summer still lingered in Elrond's gardens. "Hooray!" cried Pippin, springing up. "Here is our noble cousin. Make way for Frodo, Lord of the Ring!" "Hush!" said Gandalf from the shadows at the back of the porch. "Bleh. Evil things do not come into this valley, but all the same we should not name them. The Lord of the Ring is not Frodo, but the master of the Dark Tower of Mordor, whose power is again stretching out over the world. We are sitting in a fortress. Outside it is getting dark." "Gandalf has been saying many cheerful things like that," said Pippin. "He thinks I need keeping in order. But it seems impossible somehow to feel gloomy or depressed in this place. I feel I could sing if I knew the right song for the occasion." "I feel like singing myself," laughed Frodo, "though at the moment I feel more like eating and drinking." "Well, that will soon be cured," said Pippin. "You have shown your usual cunning in getting up just in time for a meal." "More than a meal, a feast," said Merry. "As soon as Gandalf reported that you were recovered, the preparations began." He had hardly finished speaking when they were summoned to the hall by the ringing of many bells. The hall of Elrond's house was filled with folk, elves for the most part, though there were a few guests of other sorts. Elrond, as was his custom, sat in a great chair at the end of the long table upon the dais, and next to him on the one side sat Glorfindel, and on the other side sat Gandalf. Frodo looked at them in wonder, for he had never before seen Elrond, of whom so many tales spoke. And as they sat upon his right hand and his left, Glorfindel, and even Gandalf, whom he thought he knew so well, were revealed as lords of dignity and power. Gandalf was shorter in stature than the other two, but his long white hair, his sweeping silver beard, and his broad shoulders made him look like some wise king of ancient legend. In his aged face, under great snowy brows, his dark eyes were set like coals that could leap suddenly into fire. Glorfindel was tall and straight. His hair was of shining gold, his face fair and young and fearless and full of joy. His eyes were bright and keen, and his voice like music. On his brow sat wisdom, and in his hand was strength.
I feel like Tolkien had a crush on Glorfindel,
A
honestly.
little bit, honestly. The face of Elrond was ageless, neither old nor young, though in it was written the memory of many things, both glad and sorrowful. His hair was dark as the shadows of twilight, and upon it was set a circlet of silver. His eyes were grey as a clear evening, and in them was a light like the light of stars. Venerable he seemed as a king crowned with many winters, and yet hale as a tried warrior in the fullness of his strength. He was the Lord of Rivendell, and mighty among both elves and men.
And just like the first time we read this, my first thought is Hugo Weaving was a really good choice.
He was a really good choice.
He has the kind of face and craft that could make you believe he's been around for 10,000 years.
Yeah, and like neither old nor young, but
Yeah.
has obviously seen a lot. And, like, yeah, he was a great casting choice for this.
Heck yeah. I'm gonna go grab a battery, but you can keep reading for the benefit of our friends.
Okay. In the middle of the table, against the woven cloths upon the wall, there was a chair under a canopy, and there sat a lady fair to look upon. And so like was she in form of womanhood to Elrond, that Frodo guessed that she was one of his close kindred. Young she was, and yet not so. The braids of her dark hair were touched by no frost. Her white arms and clear face were flawless and smooth, and the light of stars was in her bright eyes, grey as a cloudless night. Yet queenly she looked, and thought and knowledge were in her glance, as of one who has known many things that the years bring. Above her brow her head was covered with a cap of silver lace netted with small gems, glittering white. But her soft grey raiment had no ornament, save a girdle of leaves wrought in silver. So it was that Frodo saw her whom few mortals had yet seen, Arwen, daughter of Elrond, in whom it was said that the likeness of Luthien had come on earth again, and she was called Undómiel, for she was the even star of her people. Long she had been in the land of her mother's kin in Lorien beyond the mountains, and was but lately returned to Rivendell to her father's house. But her brothers, Elladan and Elrohir, were out upon errantry, for they rode often far afield with the rangers of the north, forgetting never their mother's torment in the dens of the orcs. Such loveliness in living thing Frodo had never seen before, nor imagined in his mind, and he was both surprised and abashed to find that he had a seat at Elrond's table among all these folk so high and fair. Though he had a suitable chair and was raised upon several cushions, he felt very small and rather out of place, but that feeling quickly passed. The feast was merry, and the food all that his hunger could desire. It was some time before he looked about him again, or even turned to his neighbors. He looked first for his friends. Sam had begged to be allowed to wait on his master, but had been told that for this time he was a guest of honor. Frodo could see him now, sitting with Pippin and Merry at the upper end of one of the side tables close to the dais. He could see no sign of Strider. Next to Frodo, on his right, sat a dwarf of important appearance, richly dressed. His beard, very long and forked, was white, nearly as white as the snow-white cloth of his garments. He wore a silver belt, and round his neck hung a chain of silver and diamonds. Frodo stopped eating to look at him. "Welcome and well met," said the dwarf, turning towards him. Then he actually rose from his seat and bowed. "Gloin, at your service," he said, and bowed still lower. "Frodo Baggins, at your service and your family's," said Frodo correctly, rising in surprise and scattering his cushions. "Am I right in guessing that you are the Gloin, one of the 12 companions of the great Thorin Oakenshield?" "Quite right," answered the dwarf, gathering up the cushions and courteously assisting Frodo back into his seat.
Somewhere there's a different dwarf named Gloin, and he gets asked that all the time, and he has to be like, no.
"Nice to meet you. I'm Gloin, not that Gloin."
Oh god, that would be a cosplay right there. Anyway, go ahead.
"And I do not ask, for I have already been told that you are the kinsman and adopted heir of our friend Bilbo the Renowned. Allow me to congratulate you on your recovery." "Thank you very much," said Frodo. "You've had some very strange adventures, I hear," said Gloin. "I wonder greatly what brings 4 hobbits on so long a journey. Nothing like it has happened since Bilbo came with us. But perhaps I should not inquire too closely, since Elrond and Gandalf do not seem disposed to talk of it." "I think we will not speak of it, at least not yet," said Frodo politely. He guessed that even in Elrond's house the matter of the ring was not one for casual talk, and in any case he wished to forget his troubles for a time. "But I am equally curious," he said, "to learn what brings so important a dwarf so far from the Lonely Mountain." Gloin looked at him. "If you have not heard, I think we will not speak of that yet either. Master Elrond will summon us all ere long, I believe, and then we shall all hear many things. There is much else that may be told." Throughout the rest of the meal they talked together, but Frodo listened more than he spoke. For the news of the Shire, apart from the ring, seemed small and far away and unimportant, while Gloin had much to tell of events in the northern regions of the Wilderland. Frodo learned that Grimbeorn the Old, son of Beorn, was now the lord of many sturdy men, and to their land between the mountains and Mirkwood neither orc nor wolf dared to go. Indeed, said Glóin, if it were not for the Beornings, the passage from Dale to Rivendell would have long ago become impossible. They are valiant men and keep open the high pass in the ford of Carrock. But their tolls are high, he added with a shake of his head, and like Beorn of old, they are not over fond of dwarves. Still, they are trusty, and that is much in these times. Nowhere are there any men so friendly to us as the men of Dale. They are good folk, the Bardings. The grandson of Bard the Bowman rules them, Brand, son of Bane, son of Bard. He is a strong king, and his realm now reaches far south and east of Esgaroth. And what of your own people? Asked Frodo. There is much to tell, good and bad, said Glóin. Yet it is mostly good. We have so far been fortunate, though we do not escape the shadow of these times. If you really wish to hear of us, I will tell tidings gladly, but stop me when you are weary. Dwarves' tongues run on when speaking of their handiwork, they say. And with that Glóin embarked on a long account of the doings of the Dwarf Kingdom. He was delighted to have found so polite a listener, for Frodo showed no sign of weariness and made no attempt to change the subject, though actually he soon got rather lost among the strange names of people and places that he had never heard of before. He was interested, however, to hear that Dain was still king under the mountain, and was now old, having passed his 250th year, venerable, and fabulously rich. Of the 10 companions who had survived the Battle of 5 Armies, 7 were still with him: Dwalin, Glóin, Dori, Nori, Bifur, Bofur, and Bombur. Bombur was now so fat that he could not move himself from his couch to his chair at the table, and it took 6 young dwarfs to lift him.
Obesity's funny.
It's a joke of its time.
Right.
And what has become of Balin and Ori and Oin? Asked Frodo. A shadow passed over Glóin's face. We do not know, he answered. It is largely on account of Balin that I have come to ask the advice of those that dwell in Rivendell. But tonight let us speak of merrier things. Glóin then began to talk of the works of his people, telling Frodo about their great labors in Dale and under the mountain. We have done well, he said. But in metalwork we cannot rival our fathers, many of whose secrets are lost. We make good armor and keen swords, but we cannot again make mail or blade to match those that were made before the dragon came. Only in mining and building have we surpassed the old days. You should see the waterways of Dale, Frodo, and the fountains and the pools. You should see the stone-paved roads of many colors, and the halls and cavernous streets under the earth, with arches carved like trees, and the terraces and towers upon the mountain sides. Then you would see that we have not been idle. I will come and see them if ever I can, said Frodo. How surprised Bilbo would have been to see all the changes in the desolation of Smaug. Glóin looked at Frodo and smiled. You were very fond of Bilbo, were you not? He asked. Yes, answered Frodo. I would rather see him than all the towers and palaces in the world. No one is telling Frodo that Bilbo is here.
I know. I feel like when you watch Kill Bill and you're wondering why no one bothered to tell her daughter was still alive.
Right? That at least makes some kind of sense because Bill probably told them not to. This makes no sense. It's just weird.
Bill told them not to. Yeah, no, it's just weird. I don't get it.
Like, everybody's being cagey motherfuckers about it, and I'm like, just tell him.
Right? What's it going to do? Like, ruin the surprise? No.
No. At length the feast came to an end. Elrond and Arwen rose and went down the hall, and the company followed them in due order. The doors were thrown open, and they went. Also, Bilbo must have been there. So, like, how did Frodo not see him?
He wasn't. He wasn't at the feast. He was in the room they're about to go into.
Oh, right. Okay.
You're getting ruled.
God damn it. The company followed them in due order. The doors were thrown open, and they went across a wide passage and through other doors, and came into a further hall. In it there were no tables, but a bright fire was burning in a great hearth between the carven pillars upon either side. Frodo found himself walking with Gandalf. This is the Hall of Fire, said the wizard. Here you will hear many songs and tales, if you can keep awake. but except on high days it usually stands empty and quiet, and people come here who wish for peace and thought. There is always a fire here all the year round, but there is little other light. As Elrond entered and went towards the seat prepared for him, elvish minstrels began to make sweet music. Slowly the hall filled, and Frodo looked with delight upon the many fair faces that were gathered together. The golden firelight played upon them and shimmered in their hair. Suddenly he noticed, not far from the further end of the fire, a small dark figure seated on a stool with his back propped against a pillar. Beside him on the ground was a drinking cup and some bread. Frodo wondered whether he was ill, if people were ever ill in Rivendell, and had been unable to come to the feast. His head seemed sunk in sleep on his breast, and a fold of his dark cloak was drawn over his face. Elrond went forward and stood beside the silent figure. "Awake, little master," he said with a smile. Then turning to Frodo, he beckoned to him. "Now at last the hour has come that you have wished for, Frodo," he said. "Here is a friend that you have long missed." The dark figure raised its head and uncovered its face. "Bilbo!" cried Frodo with sudden recognition, and he sprang forward. "Hello, Frodo, my lad," said Bilbo. "So you've got here at last. I hoped you would manage it. Well, well, so all this feasting is in your honor, I hear. I hope you enjoyed yourself." "Why weren't you there?" cried Frodo. "And why haven't I been allowed to see you before?" "Because you were asleep. I have seen a good deal of you. I have sat by your side with Sam each day. But as for the feast, I don't go in for such things much now, and I had something else to do." "What were you doing?" "Why, sitting and thinking. I do a lot of that nowadays, and this is the best place to do it in, as a rule." "Wake up, indeed," he said, cocking an eye at Elrond. There was a bright twinkle in it, and no sign of sleepiness that Frodo could see. "Wake up. I was not asleep, Master Elrond. If you want to know, you've all come out from your feast too soon, and you have disturbed me in the middle of making up a song. I was stuck over a line or two, and was thinking about them, but now I don't suppose I shall ever get them right. There will be such a deal of singing that the ideas will be driven clean out of my head. I shall have to get my friend the Dunedain to help me. Where is he?" Elrond laughed. "He shall be found," he said. "Then you two shall go into a corner and finish your task, and we will hear it and judge it before we end our merrymaking." Messengers were sent to find Bilbo's friend, though none knew where he was or why he had not been present at the feast. He probably feels a little bit awkward about being present at the feast, considering that, his girlfriend's there.
Right.
In the meanwhile, Frodo and Bilbo sat side by side, and Sam came quickly and placed himself near them. They talked together in soft voices, oblivious of the mirth and music in the hall about them. Bilbo had not much to say of himself. When he had left Hobbiton, he had wandered off aimlessly, along the road or in the country on either side, but somehow he had steered all the time towards Rivendell. "I got here without much adventure," he said, "and after a rest I went on with the dwarfs to Dale. My last journey. I shan't travel again. Old Balin had gone away. Then I came back here, and here I have been. I have done this and that. I have written some more of my book, and of course I make up a few songs. They sing them occasionally, just to please me, I think, for of course they aren't really good enough for Rivendell. And I listen, and I think. Time doesn't seem to pass here, it just is. A remarkable place altogether. I hear all kinds of news from over the mountains and out of the south, but hardly anything from the Shire. I heard about the ring, of course. Gandalf has been here often. Not that he has told me a great deal. He has become closer than ever these last few years. The Dunedain has told me more. Fancy that ring of mine causing such a disturbance. It is a pity that Gandalf did not find out more sooner. I could have brought the thing here myself long ago without so much trouble. I have thought several times of going back to Hobbiton for it, but I am getting old, and they would not let me. Gandalf and Elrond, I mean. They seemed to think that the enemy was looking high and low for me, and would make mincemeat of me if he caught me tottering about in the wild. And Gandalf said, 'The ring has passed on, Bilbo. It would do no good to you or to others if you tried to meddle with it again.' Odd sort of remark, just like Gandalf. But he said he was looking after you, so I let things be.
He was wrong.
I am frightfully glad to see you safe and sound." He paused and looked at Frodo doubtfully. "Have you got it here?" he asked in a whisper. "I can't help feeling curious, you know. After all I've heard, I should very much like just to peep at it again." "Yes, I've got it," answered Frodo, feeling a strange reluctance. "It looks just the same as ever it did." "Well, I should just like to see it for a moment," said Bilbo. When he had dressed, Frodo had found that while he slept, the ring had been hung about his neck on a new chain, light but strong. Slowly he drew it out. Bilbo put out his hand, but Frodo quickly drew back the ring. To his distress and amazement, he found that he was no longer looking at Bilbo. A shadow seemed to have fallen between them, and through it he found himself eyeing a little wrinkled creature with a hungry face and bony, groping hands. He felt a desire to strike him. The music and singing round them seemed to falter, and a silence fell. Bilbo looked quickly at Frodo's face and passed his hand across his eyes. "I understand now," he said. "Put it away. I am sorry. Sorry you have come in for this burden. Sorry about everything. Don't adventures ever have an end?" "I suppose not. Someone always has to carry on the story." "Well, it can't be helped. I wonder if it's any good trying to finish my book. But don't let's worry about it now. Let's have some real news. Tell me all about the Shire."
Bilbo's more of a badass in the book, too.
Mm-hmm. Bilbo's like, oh. All right, now I get it.
Yeah, okay. Check.
Check.
No drama,
Frodo
just...
hid the
yeah, okay.
Frodo hid the ring away, and the shadow passed, leaving hardly a shred of memory. The light and music of Rivendell was about him again. Bilbo smiled and laughed happily. Every item of news from the Shire that Frodo could tell, aided and corrected now and again by Sam, was of the greatest interest to him. From the felling of the last tree to the pranks of the smallest child in Hobbiton, they were so deep in the doings of the Four Farthings that they did not notice the arrival of a man clad in dark green cloth. For many minutes he stood looking down at them with a smile. Suddenly Bilbo looked up. "Ah, there you are at last, Dunedain," he cried. "Strider," said Frodo. "You seem to have a lot of names." "Well, Strider is one that I haven't heard before anyway," said Bilbo. "What do you call him that for?" "They call me that in Bree," said Strider, laughing, "and that is how I was introduced to him."
It's my street name.
Yo, Dunedain gang represent. Numenor for life, bro.
Strider up in here. But you know, we'll say it in Elvish because Telkontar sounds better.
It does, actually, though.
It totally does.
"And why do you call him Dunedain?" asked Frodo. "The Dunedain," said Bilbo.
Doy.
That's his other street name. "He is often called that here. But I thought you knew enough Elvish at least to know Dunedain, man of the West, Numenorian. This is not the time for lessons." He turned to Strider. "Where have you been, my friend? Why weren't you at the feast? The Lady Arwen was there." Eh. Strider looked down at Bilbo gravely. "I know," he said. "But often I must put mirth aside. Eladan and Elrohir have returned out of the wild unlooked for, and they had tidings that I wished to hear at once." "Well, my dear fellow," said Bilbo, "now you've heard the news, can't you spare me a moment? I want your help in something urgent. Elrond says this song of mine is to be finished before the end of the evening, and I am stuck. Let's go off into a corner and polish it up." It's not a thing that you can say to people out of context.
Not anymore, no. Or ever.
Strider smiled. "Come then," he said. "Let me hear it." Frodo was left to himself for a while, for Sam had fallen asleep. He was alone and felt rather forlorn, although all about him the folk of Rivendell were gathered. But those near him were silent, intent upon the music of the voices and the instruments, and they gave no heed to anything else. Frodo began to listen. At first, the beauty of the melodies and of the interwoven words in elven tongues, even though he understood them little, held him in a spell as soon as he began to attend to them. Almost it seemed that the words took shape, and visions of far lands and bright things that he had never yet imagined opened out before him. And the firelit hall became like a golden mist above seas of foam that sighed upon the margins of the world. Then the enchantment became more and more dreamlike, until he felt that an endless river of swelling gold and silver was flowing over him, too multitudinous for its pattern to be comprehended. It became part of the throbbing air about him, and it drenched and drowned him. Swiftly he sank under its shining weight into a deep realm of sleep.
Like
There he
listening
wandered.
to Enya on acid. Like listening to Enya when you're on acid.
I was just thinking, like, hey, Elrond, what do you put in your feast there, buddy?
Oh, mushrooms.
There he wandered long in a dream of music that turned into running water, and then suddenly into a voice. It seemed to be the voice of Bilbo chanting verses. Faint at first, and then clearer ran the words. This is a really long song about Eärendil.
Five. Do the first 5 and the last 5 because of the rhyme pattern.
Okay. Eärendil was a mariner that tarried in Arvernian. He built a boat of timber felled in Nimbrathil to journey in. Her sails he wove of silver fair.
And oh well, go ahead.
I mean, that's the first 5. Did you want the first full verse?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then don't say the first 5. Just say the first.
Sorry.
Her sails he wove of silver fair, of silver were her lanterns made. Her prow was fashioned like a swan, and light upon her banners laid. All right, and the last verse is really long.
Right. So just like paraphrase. It's about Eärendil, and it's about him sailing, and it's about his boat, and it's about his life, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And his armor. It goes on at length about his armor. There you go. Now you know something.
But on him mighty doom was laid, till moon should fade, an orbed star, to pass and tarry nevermore on hither shores where mortals are. Forever still a herald on an errand that should never rest, to bear his shining lamp afar, the Flammifer of Westerness.
Yay!
The chanting ceased. Frodo opened his eyes and saw that Bilbo was seated on his stool in a circle of listeners, who were smiling and applauding. Now we had better have it again, said an elf. Bilbo got up and bowed. I am flattered, Lindir, he said, but it would be too tiring to repeat it all. Not too tiring for you, the elves answered, laughing. You know you are never tired of reciting your own verses. But really, we can't answer your question at one hearing. What? Cried Bilbo. You can't tell which parts were mine and which were the Dunedain's? It is not easy for us to tell the difference between two mortals, said the elf. Racist.
Right? It gets more racist.
Nonsense, Lindir, snorted Bilbo. If you can't distinguish between a man and a hobbit, your judgment is poorer than I imagined. They're as different as peas and apples. Maybe. To sheep, other sheep would no doubt appear different, laughed Lindir. Or to shepherds.
Lindir's a fuck.
Lindir must be the elvish Karen.
Lindir.
People do elves do things and they're just like, good job, Lindir. And they're like, don't call me a Lindir. I tip.
Yeah.
Or to shepherds. But mortals have not been our study. We have other business.
No.
I'm Lindir. I have other business. I won't argue with you, said Bilbo. I'm sleepy after so much music and singing. I'll leave you to guess if you want to. He got up and came towards Frodo. Well, that's over, he said in a low voice. It went off better than I expected. I don't often get asked for a second hearing. What did you think of it? I am not going to try and guess, said Frodo, smiling. You needn't, said Bilbo. As a matter of fact, it was all mine. Except that Aragorn insisted on my putting in a green stone. He seemed to think it important. I don't know why. Otherwise, he obviously thought the whole thing rather above my head, and he said that if I had the cheek to make verses about Eärendil in the House of Elrond, it was my affair.
Whoa, Sorry, excuse me. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know why that's hilarious?
Isn't Elrond, like, descended from Earendil?
It's his dad. Earendil was his fucking father. And he and Elwing had these two boys, and then their town, their village on the beach was attacked, and they never found their boys, so they assumed they were dead. So they went off on this massive, like, Hail Mary, let's save the world quest, and never came back because the Arundel was put in the sky, and Elwing lives in the land of the gods, and occasionally she turns into a bird so she can visit her husband. But yeah, Earendil, or the Elrond and Elros, are the direct sons of Earendil. And it's like, really?
I wonder if Bilbo knows that.
I think so. He loves lore, and all this stuff from the Red Book is stuff that he learned in Rivendell. But yeah, and because they were descended from elves and men, they were both given the choice whether to be mortal or immortal, and Elrond chose immortal, and Elros chose mortal, and he was the first king of Numenor.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but unless I'm wrong, they never saw Daddy again after he sailed off to beg the gods for help. And
I mean, they saw him in the sky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Awkward. That's so awkward. That's like going into somebody's house and making up an epic poem about their parents' divorce and just being like,
yeah.
And then behold, there came a secretary. Like,
as he drove off in his Chevrolet, a blanket lay upon the seat.
And out he went. Wait.
He said he'd bring his sons a gift, but yet the rift was never.
No. Hold up. I've got something here. And then he went out from the door. He said he needed cigarettes. but lo, we saw him nevermore, and he has not returned yet.
Colbert once pointed out that you can sing it to, well, this isn't exactly how he put it, but you can sing it to the tune of the Mariner.
Rhyme of the Ancient?
No, not Rhyme of the Ancient. I am a major. No, I am the model. I am the very model of a modern major general.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Excuse my brain. Yeah. So, Arundel was a mariner who tarried in Averni, and he wrought a ship of timber, felt it nimber, felt it journey in.
Oh my. Well,
Anyway,
we have like half a page left before the end of the chapter, so let's do it.
Pokey.
He said if I had the cheek to make verses about Earendil and the House of Elrond, it was my affair. I suppose he was right. I don't know, said Frodo. It seemed to me to fit somehow, though I can't explain. I was half asleep when you began, and it seemed to follow on from something I was dreaming about. I didn't understand that it was really you speaking until near the end. It is difficult to keep awake here until you take them quite as much as food or more. They will be going on for a long time yet. What would you say to slipping off for some more quiet talk? Can we? Said Frodo. Of course. This is merrymaking, not business. Come and go as you like, as long as you don't make a noise. They got up and withdrew quietly into the shadows and made for the doors. Sam they left behind, fast asleep still, with a smile on his face. In spite of his delight at Bilbo's company, Frodo felt a tug of regret as they passed out of the Hall of Fire. Even as they stepped over the threshold, a single clear voice rose in song.